1.
Yes. So yeah, hello everyone, and welcome to one of ACM NITK's Alumni Talks. I am Rohit Chabbi, the host for today. We are very delighted to have with us Mr. Jayanth Putta, who has been the ex-convener of ACM NITK, an ECE graduate from the 2019 batch of NITK. He started his career as a software engineer at Cisco, then moved on as a solutions engineer at Datadog. He is now a product manager at OpsRamp, an IT operations management software as a service platform in New York. Grab a seat and take notes as he speaks of his experience and journey from being an engineer to breaking into product management. Hello, sir. Welcome to the Alumni Talks. If anyone wants to ask any questions to the speaker about product management or anything in general, feel free to put it on the chat box and we will answer it at the end. Now, without wasting any more time, I'll hand over the meet to Mr. Jayan, sir. Sir, you can carry on.
Thank you. Hey everyone. Firstly, thanks ACM for organizing this talk. As you can see, as you guys already might know, my name's Jayanth. I graduated the 2019 batch from ECE. And today I'm just going to sort of talk about, the journey that led me to product management and what product management as a career might look like, as well as like other tech roles that you might want to consider, as you move, as you graduate from NITK and then move into the industry. So, the agenda for the talk is simple. Intro, what is PM, breaking into PM, the career progression in product and other roles, and finally we'll end with like a Q&A. And let's get started. So, introduction. Super quick introduction about myself. I joined NITK in 2015, and I joined just like a lot of people did. I did engineering because my parents wanted me to. And eventually, I realized that EC might not have been my calling, and I didn't know if I wanted to do that for the long term. And so I started exploring a lot of different things in college, and this involved like being part of ACM. I was part of the ECEL. I was part of Toastmasters, just taking part in like a lot of different things in college. So that happened for like 4 years, and soon after, like around third year, when I was applying for internships, I applied for Cisco, and I interned there for 3 months during the summer. And after that, I got a pre-placement offer, and I continued at Cisco for the next year after that. Now, in 2019, I graduated, joined Cisco as a software engineer. Did all the typical software engineering things, building features, delivering them, and everything that has to do with software development. Eventually, during the pandemic, I was sort of like rethinking my career goals and aspirations, and I was, sort of trying to think of what other paths I could go into. And I knew that product management was some sort of path that a lot of people were talking about. Didn't know too much about what it was, but I did know that it sounded really interesting. I mean, it is a buzzword after all. And so I started researching, and I wanted to apply for roles, but as I was applying, a lot of people gave me feedback that, I'm too early in my career, or, maybe I need more experience before I can even apply for a product management role. And so at that time, what I did was I started looking for other tech roles, and I stumbled across what is called a solutions engineer, which I'd never heard of up until that point. And so solutions engineer, a synonymous term, sales engineer, there are like a lot of different kinds of tech roles that we don't usually hear about. And basically what a solutions engineer does is they're like a technical resource for any customer. So it's a completely customer facing role. And you basically help customers through any problems they're facing, a lot like customer support, but not with the same negative connotation that customer support might have. Now, over there, you give demos to prospective customers, you help solve like technical problems without any coding required. So it's still a very technical role, just no coding. Now, I did that for like a year and 2 months or so. And then, I figured it was a really good time to change. And I really wanted to move into product by that point. I talked to a lot of different people over LinkedIn within my company about what product managers do. And I figured this would be a really good place to, grow and, develop the right skill set for the future. So eventually I started, applying for product manager roles and I'll show you like what all that looks like in the coming slides. But I started applying left, right, and center. And within 2 or 3 months, I was able to get a role as a product manager at OpsRamp, which is like a Series C funded startup. They're like 300 people, and it has that complete startup vibe, super different from any of the large companies that I was working at before. We'll get into what that looks like again in the coming slides. And finally, what career progression is going to look like, again, coming soon. So let's move on to what is actually product management. Okay, so product managers do a lot of different things in different companies, but you can see it as this picture you see on the right. It's the intersection of user experience, tech, and business. Now, why do we need a product manager? Because ultimately, if a product succeeds or fails, it's 100% the responsibility of the product manager. We need a product manager because somebody needs to determine which direction the product needs to go in. What should you build next? What do customers want? What will drive business value? And also what is technically feasible? There has to be somebody who sort of brings all of these together. And that's what you see there, the intersection of these three. So as you can see, the 2 points over here, it's that they build out the roadmap and vision for the product, which is just a fancy word for saying that I decide what features need to be built next. And as well as determining where I want the product to be. What do I envision the product to be like 5 years from now or 10 years from now? The second thing is that I have to communicate with all the key stakeholders in the company because it's a really, really high impact and high visibility role. So that means customers, engineers, leadership, the design team, and any of the other teams like marketing or sales. All of these communicate with the product manager on a very regular basis. Now, this is what a day-to-day looks like. There'll be like 20 different customers coming to you and be like, oh, we should build a quick pay feature. Oh, we should build a bookmark feature. Oh, we should build a QR feature. And so it's sort of like a comical version of saying that you have to sort of identify what is required, and then you have to cut through the noise and decide what needs to be built based on a variety of different factors. I'll show you what everything I do on a day-to-day, so that I don't bore you with all the roadmap vision. This is exactly what I do on a day-to-day. I talk with customers almost every day or every other day, some or the other customer, about how they're using the product, what they like, what they don't like, sort of empathize with them, evaluate what kinds of things, what kind of pains they're still facing with the product so we can build solutions around them. The second thing is, once we have a bunch of these different customers, they gave us a bunch of things they want, I have to actually prioritize what needs to be built next. And this, you can use a variety of tools for that, but you have to prioritize based on certain factors that you consider important. For example, how feasible is it from a technical perspective? How big of a customer is asking for this? If a customer is paying you $20 million a year, you want to definitely prioritize them over a customer who's only paying you $50 a year. Then writing product specs and requirements. So this is literally a Google Doc where I write out what exactly I want for a feature to look like. So what this means is, if I want a QR code scanner, I have to tell engineering exactly what I want it to look like, so I can go to the design team, I can get a mock-up of what I want, and I write it out. It should perform A, B, C functionality, and then engineering will figure out how to do it. I also check on the progress of features already in development. The product manager has to be involved in every aspect of the development of any product, so that when engineering is building a feature, we have to make sure that we're still aligned with what customers want. And customers' wants are constantly changing. And so we need to make sure that if a customer want has changed, I communicate that to engineering so they change what they're doing accordingly to fit that new requirement. So we have to constantly be in the check on all the new features that are already being developed. Now, working with the design team, this is one of the most fun parts of the role. You tell the design team that I want the product to do exactly A, B, C, D functionality, and they will come back to you with what it'll look like in the product, with like interactive mockups. And it's super fun because you can tell them, oh, I want to change this, or I want to change that, or I want this to perform like in this specific way. Super fun part of the role. 6, the most important, is evaluating the success of anything that you ship out to customers. Now, ultimately, again, the product manager is responsible for the success or failure of the product. So if the product fails, we did something wrong. If the product succeeds, we did something right. And that will only be understood when you check metrics around that new product or feature that you built. And so I would actually go to a dashboard and look at the various metrics of something I built. Is a customer using it? How often are they using it? Is it giving them value? And also any qualitative feedback we hear from them, that will also serve as a good metric as to whether something is successful. And finally, miscellaneous things would be like, talking to the marketing team, or talking to the marketing team. For example, if I build a new feature, I want to tell them how they can market it to customers, because ultimately, if customers aren't going to use it, then there's no point of building it. And a lot of other things like enabling people inside the company and outside the company on the product, traveling sometimes to conferences so you can get the word out about your specific product, and so forth. Now, you don't want this to happen. And this is very common, where the product you envision, is what you see on the left. The product you delivered is on the right. Super common, because, and this happens a lot when a product manager is not well versed with what customers want. And that's the most important. Similar story here. All the engineers build this and they're like, oh, this looks so good. But then when you see it from a user perspective, it's really awkward. And so this is where a product manager sort of fills in the gaps. Now, of course, it's a great career. It has a lot of upsides, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But the first thing you should know is that any single role that you ever take up is not, it's not always that the grass is greener. There's always going to be things that are wrong with any role, or things that you might not like. And these are the very common downsides of product management. The biggest one would be, honestly, I think the fourth one, which is that there's lots and lots of uncertainty when you're trying to do anything as a product manager. You have to work with limited data and information. Customers are very vague. You have to influence without authority. That's a huge one. You don't have anyone reporting to you. If engineers are going to build a feature, you have to influence or convince them to build it. They're not going to build it because you say so. Now, similarly, the third one, making big decisions, could be a pro or con depending on who you are, but some people prefer not to make those really big, high impact decisions. And finally, imposter syndrome. It's tremendous in this role. You're always going to feel like you don't know enough, and that sort of comes back to the working with limited data or information. You're just going to have to try piece together things without feeling like you actually know what you're doing. And that's super common. Even as you move up, even if you're a vice president of product, you will oftentimes feel imposter syndrome. So now that's sort of what product management as a role is. And any questions we can take at the end regarding any more detail you want about that. But here I'll show you really briefly how breaking into PM, how people generally break into PM. So what are the various roles that lead to PM? There honestly is not a specific role. I moved from software to solutions to PM, and that's only one such career path. People come in from every single role out there. People come in from consulting backgrounds, software, they come in from sales, marketing, they come in from customer success teams, they come in from everywhere. And so it's more about just showing that you have the necessary skills, because PM as a role is very loosely defined in most companies. So again, software to PM, moving from software is no different than moving from any other role. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So one of the biggest problems with product management is that you cannot get a product manager role without having prior product management experience. So it's a classic chicken and egg problem. The bright side is that if you do break into product management, you have infinite career opportunities, because the competition is so low, because it's so hard to get in the first place. So now there are generally 4 different ways people move into product. And the easiest one is going directly as a PM intern and then getting converted to full-time. Now, so I urge anybody who's currently looking for an internship, if you're interested in product management, go to company websites and actually search for PM interns. Almost every company out there has an internship position open for product management. And if you do well, usually they convert you to full-time. Now, full-time, they'll usually convert you to either one of the two roles you see below, APM or PM. APM is Associate Product Manager and PM is Product Manager. And after that, the career progression I'll show in a little bit. However, there are also other entry-level roles, something like a product analyst, which is it's around the same level as an APM, so super entry level, but it gives you all the basics you need to become a really good product manager in the future. So these are roles you can consider as well when you're Googling or going through any websites or LinkedIn. So this is the easiest way, and highly urge it if you're looking for an internship. The second would be actually going for a master's degree, like an MEM, MBA, a master's of any kind. There's so many master's programs out there, which are hardly a year and a half, and a lot of these people break into product management through that. The third is to shift internally within your company. A lot of companies out there, once you join, you will have the opportunity to shift internally after 3, 4, 5 years or so. Now, Datadog, my old company, was one of those companies. If I stayed in my solutions role for another 2 to 3 years, I could have easily moved to a product manager role, but I didn't want to wait that long. And this is again, one of the better options out there. Now, the last option is the most obvious one, is to apply externally to companies, which is what I did. Also the hardest option. And it's the hardest because of the chicken and egg problem, where companies don't want to take you if you don't have experience. So these are the 4 ways you can move in, and I can answer any questions about any of these when we get to the end. But to actually get a job in product management, there are just 4 things. Now, a lot of you might be familiar with software, how you lead code to get a job. It's the same thing with product. It's a very systematic, almost gamified at this point. You play the game, you'll get the role. Whether you're actually good at the role is something you can determine on the job. So it's 4 simple steps: gain necessary experience. And I put experience in quotes because experience, again, is loosely defined. People come in from every single role. Your experience, whatever it might be, can definitely be related to product management. You just have to frame it that way. The second is resume. The third is interview prep. And fourth is applying for companies, just like you would do anywhere else. So with your resume, I can answer any deeper questions on this as well, but I would leave it to these 3. And you can, work off of these. Like, the first and foremost is just identify what skills you have, whatever you've done already, and how they're related to product. And again, super easy. You just have to Google search, how is my leadership role relevant to product? And you'll find a lot of different examples out there. The second is to make every single bullet point on your resume, if you have experience or you have a project, every single bullet point has to be impact driven. Which means that if you did anything, what was the impact it had on people, on the business, or on your organization? How many people came to your event? 300 plus people. Great, that's an impact. And so forth. So what I did for my resume was I went through my entire resume one by one. Each single bullet point, I made it like what I did and what impact it had. What I did, what impact it had. And that made a huge difference when people were looking at my resume. And the last thing is always keep your resume to 1 page. There's some conflicting advice out there about this. I found that so far, companies don't have the time to look at anything more than 1 page. And 100% you can fit anything that you have, all of your experience, in 1 page. If you're unable to fit it in 1 page, that means you need to cut down. You need to make it more targeted. So again, can answer any questions about this later on. When it comes to interview prep for product, it's the same as any other role. Again, gamify the experience, which is what I was saying earlier. If you've heard of lead coding to bag a software role, play the game, you'll get a product management role as well. Now, there are just 4 or 5 main aspects of the product management interview. Not super hard to learn, but little harder to implement during an interview. The first one is a guesstimation, where you guess like how many golf balls can fit in an airplane or something like that. Something really absurd, or estimate the height of the Empire State Building, something like that. Super easy to learn with practice. Do 20 questions, you'll get the hang of it. Product design is a huge one, which every single company asks you, which is something like improve Google Maps. That's the question. And you have to break it down, understand customer pain points, try to build solutions. There's no right answer here, but they just want to see how you're thinking through a product design from beginning to the end. The third one is what we call an execution type interview. This is where the interviewer will sort of ask you, oh, our sales have gone down ever since 1 month ago. And that's all. Again, you have to sort of break it down and ask them questions. Oh, did we release an update? Oh, was there any major event that happened in the world or something like that? You have to sort of break it down and try to figure out where the problem was so that they can fix it. Fourth is metrics. This is, again, what I said was super important to be a product manager, where you have to determine whether the success or failure of a product, that's completely based on the metrics that you choose to look at. And so here they'll ask you a question like, pick YouTube's key metrics, or how would you identify the success of Instagram Reels? And so you have to choose metrics around qualitative or quantitative metrics, and walk the interviewer through which ones are most important to determine the success of the product. And finally, the favorite product question is a very standard one, where you just talk about your favorite product, end to end, what you like about it, what you don't like, what would you like to see, how would you improve it, and so forth. So these are super standardized in the industry, and all you have to do is learn these 5, not super hard. It honestly doesn't take you more than a month to get the hang of it. Practice is the most important, though. That could take longer. So that's where mock interviews are super important. And being in college, you guys are very lucky that you could, you have people around you to interview with. So mock interviews, people do there are people who've done 10 mock interviews and got a role. There are people who've done 300 and they still haven't gotten a role. But what's important is that practice matters, and mock interviews are one of the most important aspects of the interview prep for PM. Whoops. And lastly, we did resume, preparing for the interview. Lastly is applying for companies. Now, I'm sure most of you know about the first and third one, LinkedIn and cold applying to the website or job postings or whatever. The second one is the most important. The second one is the most interesting one, rather, which is Slack channels. And this is one that I figured out when I was applying for my solutions engineering role at Datadog. There are a lot of public Slack channels out there which you can join for free, and you'll find so many different sub channels there where you can get people to review your resume. There's 20,000 people on the group. Somebody's going to review your resume. You could ask them for interview help. You can find mock interview partners. You can ask for how to become a better product manager. There's so many channels for so many things. And one of the best ones is you can find job postings that people post, people who are in companies, they post on the Slack channels, and you can directly message them and ask them about if they have any opportunities available. And I found that that is the best way so far that I've gotten so many interviews, is through these Slack channels. Now, there are some really famous ones out there. These are the resources you might use for preparing. There are these 2 really famous books called Cracking the PM Interview and Decoding Conquer. There's a YouTube channel called Exponent, which sort of walks you through how to answer some of those questions that we just talked about. LinkedIn, there are these 2 influencers, super great. They post almost every day or every other day about breaking into product management. Andrew Bowker, that guy, he's actually one of the people who insists on playing the game and learning on the job. And finally, Slack channels. These are the really famous ones. There's one by the Product School and there's one by Lewis Lin. Both have these huge channels for interview prep or resume or finding jobs. Now, finally, the career progression in PM. It's a lot like any other tech role out there. The only thing I mentioned earlier was that you've solved the chicken and egg problem, so you've basically eliminated so much competition out there. There's a really small pool of highly talented PMs, and the companies are fighting for those PMs. Now, once you become a product manager, we had the earlier thing where you could go through a product analyst to an APM, associate product manager, to a product manager role. Once you're in a product manager role, your career progression would look like one of 2 different paths over here. One is the individual contributor path, where you become a senior PM, you become a group PM who sort of oversees a group of PMs, but still contributes to the daily PM responsibilities. And then you have senior group PM and so forth. On the management track, you would have senior PM going to a director, to a vice president, and vice president with more responsibility or something like that. So these are the two common paths. However, there is also a really other good path, which is going to other tech roles. So product management, because it's tied into all these other roles, as I said, you have to communicate with all the various stakeholders. It provides a really good foundation if you're moving into any other role in the company. So if you want to move to solutions, if you want to move to software, if you want to move to marketing, all that you could do from here. Now, it's not necessarily going to be easy, but you have a leg up over a lot of people because you've interacted with these teams so much. And some of these tech roles, by the way, are things like, as I said, solutions and sales engineering, something that I've never heard of till I just ended up Googling and like finding it. These are high-paying tech roles, requires a lot of technical expertise, requires a lot of skills that you might not see when you're in college and you're around the same group of people. For me, a lot of people were doing software, and so I also ended up doing software. And I sort of lived in this bubble where I didn't know that other things existed. I urge you guys to like go to company websites. You'll find so many other tech roles out there. For example, Amazon has something called a customer solutions manager, something again, super technical, but something that I never heard of till one of my friends got that role. So this is sort of what the career ahead would look like. Now, finally, some closing thoughts here. It's much easier to explore in college than after college. You have so much time, you have so much opportunity within college to do a lot of different things. So startup, if you have an idea, that's always a great one. You can join any kind of leadership role. It will definitely help you. In my case, I was a convener at ACM. I was VP of education at Toastmasters. Like there were a lot of different things that I tried out in college, which definitely helped. Now, again, tech roles aren't limited to software and product management. There's so many more out there, like we just discussed. I'm happy to talk more about those, if anybody has any questions. A big one is that shifting jobs too often is not a big deal, which a lot of people talk about. I shifted 3 jobs in 3 years, and which is technically a red flag by most company standards. But again, that's just a myth. Most companies don't care that you shifted once every year. What they care about is, did you do well in the interview and can you provide them value right now? Yes, of course, long-term value is important, but they're not going to really reject your resume just because you jump ship 2 or 3 times. And finally, 100% do not worry if you're unsure about what you want to do. It's completely normal, whatever year of college you're in, because even after college, I guarantee that at least half the people out here, or if not more than 80%, have no idea what they're doing. And they don't even know if this is what they want to do in the long term. They're still figuring stuff out. That's completely okay. So in college was always unsure about what I wanted to do, and I was always worried about it. Don't worry, it's totally chill even after. So with that, I sort of blazed through a lot of stuff here, but any questions so far?
So yeah, thank you, sir. It was a very insightful talk. Now I would like to ask Akhil to take it over for the question answer session.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rohit. So once again, thanks a lot, sir, for your insights. We can now begin with the questions for you, sir. Viewers, if you have any questions, you can put it in the chat and we will answer it shortly. So we have a question from Ashutosh. He asks, what is the difference between HDE role and a PM role?
Between software engineering role?
Yes.
Yeah. So okay. So as a software engineer, what you would do is you would you'll be in a company. You'll code in a certain language. Basically, your manager will come to you and be like, customers wanted this. We need to build XYZ thing. So for example, in Cisco, I was working with the VPN team, and so we needed to build a new feature for their VPN. So the product manager actually came to me and okay, we need to
iPod 10 minutes iPod.
Yeah, so basically the product manager came to me, asked me to build something, and I basically have to figure out how it's going to be built. So I would actually choose the technology, like, are we building in React.js? Are we building in Java? Are we building in, like, I don't know, Golang or something? I would talk with my team. I would discuss, various algorithms that I could use to, like, sort of build out that feature. And then I would come back to the product manager and be like, hey, this is what we built. How does it look? The product manager would sort of be like, oh, customers wanted this. Could we, like, change this up? And so I would go back and actually code up the changes and then bring it back. So as a software engineer, I would primarily be focused on writing code, reading code, testing out the various aspects of whatever I built. Whereas a product manager is more about the higher level picture, where I decide what needs to be built and I leave the how to the engineering. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yes. So we have Arshad asking, what are the technical skills required for a PM role?
Yeah, so again, PM is super loosely defined. So when it comes to technical skills, largely depends on the industry you're in. But for example, if you're in software companies, common knowledge about technologies is honestly the most important part. So for example, do you know how Kubernetes and Docker work? Do you know how AWS, Azure, GCP for, like, cloud technologies, do you know how they work? And any of the nitty gritty details in both of these, like that, and then along with any technical industry knowledge. So for example, the industry I'm in is cloud monitoring. So Datadog and OpsRamp both are in cloud monitoring. And for that, I need to know common things like, what are the actual terminologies used here? So we have, like, metrics, logs, traces. These are all, like, just common terms that are thrown around. So in terms of pure technical skills, knowing coding is good, but it's 100% not necessary to be a PM. The only way coding, for example, might help you is when you're applying for a company, you can be like, I have technical expertise. And there's no better way to say that you have technical expertise than that you can code. So overall, like, the technical skills, it's very broad, but a good understanding of technologies in general. Any new technology you might hear about, can you, like, sort of explain it to a 5-year-old? That's honestly the most important part.
Okay. So next we have, how did solutions engineering prepare you for your role as a PM?
Yeah, so solutions engineering is a very customer facing role. And as I said earlier, the PMs are super customer facing as well. Solutions engineering allowed me to talk to a lot of customers through demos, through customer calls, troubleshooting issues, getting technical with the product. Honestly, doing a lot of jugaad in the product to, like, sort of achieve their end goal. It sort of gives you, like, 2 or 3 core skills. One would be customer communication. How can you ask the right questions to customers? The second would be, how do you communicate with them to get the answers that you want out of them? And finally, how can you like synthesize whatever they say and make it something tangible for engineering to work with? These are all skills that you learn as a solutions engineer, along with the actual technical expertise you gain on the job. So again, technical expertise need not be a solutions role. It could be any role, but these are, like, the 3 or 4 things that sort of it helped with.
Okay. Next we have, you mentioned that a product manager is the manager of the product and not of the team that makes it. Given this, how do you convince your team to build it the way you envision, given you're not really their manager?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things is you have to be 100% data driven. Everything you say to any person in the company has to be backed up by evidence of what you're trying to do. So yes, your vision is to build this product. It has to look like, some fancy spaceship or whatever, but you have to show evidence of who wants this. Okay, which customers? Tell me the customers' names. How big are they? Why do you want to build this? Is there data around customer usage? Like, sometimes I actually go into these data stores that we have. I do data analysis myself to understand customer behavior on the application. And so being data driven is literally the only way that you could convince others effectively. And this goes for any stakeholder in the company. No one's going to trust you unless you have evidence to back up whatever you're saying. So I honestly think that's the only way that you could sort of convince or influence your team, even though you don't have authority.
Okay. And additionally, you did say that we'll be low on data as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, exactly. So a lot of times you're working with limited data. So you have to it is okay. So product managers get paid for only one big overarching reason. You are taking the risks for the company. You are high impact, you're working with limited data, and you're taking a call. You're getting paid to take that risk. And so ultimately, the reason product managers are highly paid is because, again, if this product succeeds, it's because of you. So working with limited data is super common, just that you do have to have as much evidence as possible, rather, if that makes sense.
Okay. Got that. From the live stream, we have Nirmal asking, wouldn't companies generally prefer if the PM they employ have great technical expertise as well? The more, the better kind of situation.
Absolutely, 100%. They depends on where you go actually. So like if you're a product manager in banking, that might be a little different. But product managers in tech companies, you could come from a non-technical role, but having technical expertise is definitely valued. Which is why when I was applying for OpsRamp, I really pushed my software engineering experience forward, as like I have technical expertise. Here's the evidence.
Okay. So next we have, you've mentioned that a PM faces imposter syndrome. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, so imposter syndrome. So I can give an example of myself. Like I'm in OpsRamp right now. Honestly, half the time I don't think I know what I'm doing, but at the same time, I realize that I'm still doing a lot better than what is expected of me. So it's more like you know you have a certain skill set. You just have to emphasize that you have that skill set and show people that you know what you're doing, and basically learn on the job. Imposter syndrome is super common in every single role. It's just that in PM, again, working with that limited data, sort of like balancing so many different things, you might feel like you don't know what you're doing, but honestly, a lot of the times you do. And so it's more about just mentally, telling yourself that it's not all that bad, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, got that. Next we have, what are some of the hard and soft skills that you need to get in, and what are the skills you've picked up on the job? So this could be
Yes.
answered personally, from your perspective as well.
The soft skills are more like how your communication between stakeholders. How good are you at negotiating or like influencing people? How good are you at talking with customers? Are you likable as a person? These are all like soft skills that sort of show in the interview, and honestly are the most important when you're interviewing. Literally whatever you do during the interview is what you're going to be doing in real life, unlike software where I'm going to be lead coding and doing super hard problems which I'm never actually going to use on my job, in my day to day. So those are the hard and soft skills that sort of you'll need to get in. Once you get in, it's again just sort of strengthening the existing soft skills that you already have, because again, PM is loosely defined as a role, and so it could be a variety of different things. You just have to on the job you'll figure all of them out anyway.
Okay, got that. So could you tell us some of the best things about being a product manager?
Yeah, so like first and foremost, you have the highest visibility in the company. Being in a startup of 300 people, the CEO calls me all the time, and he's like, what are we doing, where are we going, is this ready? um, Again, high visibility, super high impact. It is a high paying job, usually on par or a little lesser than software engineers here and there. um, and overall, like I feel like it really develops your skill set in a variety of different fields because you interact with so many different people, which is again one of the really fun parts of being a PM. It's super challenging on a day to day, but you can also have fun with it if you really enjoy it.
Sure, fair enough. So next, your thoughts on the trade-offs between working and going for higher education.
Yeah. So okay. So when it comes to higher education, for example, I have not done a master's yet, MBA or master's. I strongly recommend anyone who's thinking of a master's or like sort of on the edge, think about what your career goals are first, or whether you want to do a PhD or whether you want to go into academia. what are your like broad term goals, and then work back and decide whether a master's is the right way to get there. As an example, I moved to a product manager role. Right now, this role is a role that a lot of MBA graduates come into. So the question arises, do I really need to do an MBA now? Because I'll end up in the same role that I was in earlier. So your reason should be really strong. In my case, if I want to do an MBA in the future, I would do it purely for the sake of getting, maybe a faster career progression or building my network, wider somehow. But other than that, I don't see any reason why I need to do a master's. So I strongly recommend that anyone looks ahead first and then works back to decide whether you want to do a master's. Don't go with the rat race and decide that, oh, everyone's doing a master's, I need to do a master's as well. The only exception to this is if you really want to move to another country, like the US, for example, doing a master's is the best way to get your, access to the job market here. So other than that, I wouldn't see it's totally something you have to consider as part of your broad term goals.
Yeah, got that. Finally, I guess we have one last question. So, can you walk us through a product you've worked on or conceptualized during your tenure as a PM? And how do you go about building the roadmap for it?
Yeah. So I'll give the example I'm doing right now. So in this company, it's a cloud monitoring software. Any monitoring software has dashboarding is like a really big part of that product. So customers go into the product. The first thing they see is the dashboards. Is everything looking right? Is the CPU usage good? And that kind of stuff. For example, right now what I'm doing is I'm trying to make dashboards. I'm sort of revamping dashboards completely. And how I'm doing that is I first talked with a lot of customers. I looked at a lot of previous interviews. I looked through our internal data analysis. We have a data analysis team. I asked them for data. I did it myself. I started combining all these, and I decided the various features that needed to be built or the various things that we need to change to make it a lot better, to improve the user experience. So I have a bunch of these things that I'm looking at. Now I have to prioritize them. So I use some metrics like how big is the company, how long would it take to actually build this? Is this a quick win? Is this like a low-hanging fruit? That kind of thing. Once I decide this, I take that one thing that I want to build and go straight to the design team, and I tell them exactly what I want to build. And they told me that, oh, here it is. Here's your design. And so I worked with them on a Zoom call, and I'm like, I want to change this. I want to change this. Oh, can you make this a different kind of drop down? That kind of thing. Once that is set, I took that and I went to the engineering team lead and I told them, this is what we have. This is what we want it to look like. Can you make this? They'll be like, yeah, we could, or no, we can't. We can do this instead. The engineering team goes, they go and build it over the course of 3-4 months, however long it takes, and comes back. And then we sort of iterate on this solution. Once we ship it to customers, it is not the end. That's not the end goal. Shipping it is not the end goal. Making it really, really good is the end goal. So we ship it to them. They love the dashboards, but still something's missing. We keep iterating. I do the same thing. Design, engineering, customers. Design, engineering, customers. And so that's sort of the entire flow that I would go through over the course of 3 or 4 months.
Okay, got that. That's it. This is the end for the Q&A session. Over to you, Ricky.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so
yeah, sir.
Yeah.
You wanted to...
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say, if you guys want to reach out for anything, resume help, you want to have a career discussion, this is my contact info. You can reach out anywhere. Totally cool.
Okay, thank you, sir. So with that, we come to the end of our today's talk. It was wonderful having you talk about the switch you made into product management and insights about product management, the career ahead of it. I'm sure you have inspired the viewers with the way your journey has ascended. Thank you so much, and for taking your time to do this. And we wish you all the very best for your future endeavors. Yeah, thank you all the viewers for attending the live, and yeah, thank you for being there.
Awesome.